that sounds right. We have one moon. But if we say how many moons in the universe, the answer is probably billions. And if we say how many moons in the solar system, just our solar system, it's hundreds. It's more than 100. So people think of the moon as if it's one thing, but in fact there are lots of moons. How many of those moons have we landed on?
It does look rather dense.
How many have we actually landed on? One moon. Now I'm going to surprise you, because I'll surprise you again. We've landed on 2 moons. We've landed on this moon here, but we've also landed on another moon. We landed on another moon about 14 years ago, and I can, just to prove that I'm not lying, I'm going to show you the spacecraft that landed on the moon. If you look over there, in that direction, you will see a parachute. And you see the parachute up there, hanging from the ceiling. And underneath the parachute, there's a little mini spacecraft. That mini spacecraft is called Huygens. And Huygens was a spacecraft that went to the planet Saturn. And the planet Saturn has lots of moons. One of them is called Titan. And in 2005, that Huygens spacecraft, that's a model, not the real one, but the Huygens spacecraft landed on Titan, which is a moon of Saturn. It's not a little moon, it's actually bigger than our moon. It's as big as Mercury. It's a very big moon, orbiting around Saturn. Now, I still think some of you are looking at me in disbelief and say, I don't believe there really is. We actually landed on Titan. And what does Titan look like? I'm going to show you a picture of Titan. You may never have seen Titan before. It's just coming up, just to prove that we've landed there. Here is Titan, if I can find it in my little list. Titan's gone missing. There it is.
I honestly...
Right, have a look at Titan, everybody.
I had to watch it so many times.
Now,
So I just couldn't get over what I was seeing.
very interesting if you've never seen it before. When I look at that, I think it looks a little bit like a sort of hazy black and white picture of the Earth, which is where we live. So it looks very much like a planet. It's as big as Mercury, and it's got some interesting features. What are the white features? Anybody, any children like to guess what the white features are? What do you think they are? Anybody suggest? We've got them on the Earth as well. What are they? Clouds, yeah. Now that's really interesting. Have you seen a planet with clouds before? Very unlikely. The Earth has got clouds. Very few planets have clouds. Now, reason planets don't have clouds is because planets don't usually have atmospheres. Atmospheres like the air. You can't have clouds unless you have atmospheres. So this is interesting. This proves that Titan has got an atmosphere, which is good news. Okay? Very good news that Titan has an atmosphere. Let's try and guess what the Titan's atmosphere is made of. Anybody like to suggest what gas might be in Titan's atmosphere? It's one that we've got on the Earth. Anybody got an idea? I'll give you a clue. It's not oxygen. It's the other one. It's not hydrogen. Very good guess. It could be hydrogen. Yeah. Carbon dioxide. Now that's a good guess because a lot of planets do have a bit of carbon dioxide, but it's the one that we've got full of. This room is full of it actually. It's air. It's air. Yeah, very good. Helium is the sun's full of helium. You're all missing it. It begins with N. It's nitrogen. So it's got an atmosphere of nitrogen, which is good because it's like the Earth's air, but unfortunately, what hasn't it got? Oxygen. Okay, so it's difficult to live there. You can't breathe on Titan. It's also very cold. It's about -200 degrees Celsius because it's so far from the sun. Now, we know that it's got nitrogen in its atmosphere. We know that it's got clouds. What do you think? What are our clouds made of? Anybody know what our clouds are made of? Water. That would be good. So if they were made of water, you could drink the water. It would rain and you could drink it. You think that's good? We could go to Titan. At least we got water. We can live at Titan because it's got water. Unfortunately, they are not made of water. Sorry about that. They're made of methane. which is a sort of like petrol, really, like a gas. It's actually liquid methane because it's so cold. Methane isn't a gas anymore, it's actually turned into a liquid. Now, what Huygens found when it landed on Titan was something which we never found on any other planet, and this is lakes, rivers, and seas. Can you believe that underneath all that cloud, there's lakes and there's rivers and there's seas, which is makes it sound a lot like the Earth. But unfortunately, the bad news is, anybody guess what the lakes and rivers and seas are made of? You're going to say water. You know it's a trick question, don't you? No, it's not going to be water, it's going to be something else. But what are the clouds made of? Can you remember? Methane. So the lakes are made of methane. So you could go swimming on Titan, but I wouldn't want to swim in liquid methane. That would be like swimming in petrol. So I'm not sure that's such a good idea. But the point is this: Titan is a bit like the Earth. It really looks more like the Earth than most planets do. It's just made of the wrong sorts of materials. But maybe there are other life forms which would be happy to live in a methane lake and to have methane clouds and to breathe nitrogen. So who knows? Okay, we're going to move on to other moons in the solar system. Titan's quite an important one, and we've actually landed on it. But it's not the biggest one. There are other moons which are very interesting and very different. So we're going to another planet which is a bit nearer and a bit bigger than Saturn. This is going around Saturn. Can you think of a planet which is bigger than Saturn? Any ideas? Jupiter. So let's go to Jupiter. Why not? We've got nothing better to do. Let's go to Jupiter. So here's Jupiter. I'm sure many of you see this wonderful picture of Jupiter. Can you imagine how big this planet is? If you see one of those little white dots, that could be the Earth. That's how big the Earth is compared to Jupiter. Jupiter is unbelievably enormous. Yeah. There's a red hole. It's coming up. It's called the red spot. I think that might be it. There are lots of red holes. These red circles are storms. They're like hurricanes, cyclones going around. So there's constant, every day it's a storm on Jupiter. One great problem: nobody's ever landed on Jupiter. Nobody's ever tried to land on Jupiter because, are you going to tell me? Because it's made out of gas. Can you step up and give this talk? This is brilliant. It's made out of gas. So if you tried to step out on Jupiter, you would just go for about 1 billion miles. You go right through to the other end of Jupiter. Because it's called a gas giant because it's made out of gas and it's a giant. Okay. So the interesting places to look at, Jupiter isn't actually interesting. You can never live there, but maybe we could live on one of the moons. So I'm going to take you back and give you a bit of a historical background to Jupiter. 400 years ago, there was a scientist who you've probably heard of called Galileo Galilei. Who's heard of Galileo? He was one of the first astronomers, and he used one of the first telescopes. The telescope had just been invented. So one evening, he was looking at this planet Jupiter. There's your red spot. There's your red spot. This planet Jupiter. Through his telescope, he saw something very weird, but very important. He saw 4 white dots. 4 white dots. They weren't on Jupiter, they were next to Jupiter. So he wondered what those 4 white dots were. And he saw they were moving. They weren't in one place, they kept moving to different places. And then he had this brilliant idea, which was they were going around Jupiter. And what goes around a planet? A moon. So he discovered 4 moons going around Jupiter. First person in history to see a moon through a telescope. So this was an amazing idea because nobody had imagined that any other planet had moons. We've got our moon, but none of the other planets, they don't have moons, do they? But he discovered they do have moons, and that was a very big discovery. So they're now called the Galilean moons. So when we think of a moon, we think of moon, they all look the same probably, don't they? I'm going to show you they're all very different. They're like 4 siblings who've all got different personalities, and they have very different personality. We're going to start with the first sibling is called Ganymede. Ganymede is the largest moon in the solar system. Not in the universe probably, but the largest moon in the solar system. Let's have a look and try and guess what Ganymede's going to look like and see if it looks like. So shut your eyes for a moment, think what's Ganymede going to look like? Open your eyes and you see what it really does look like. This is the biggest moon, much bigger than our moon, bigger than Mercury, bigger than a planet. And this is called Ganymede. Very few people have ever seen Ganymede. Hi. It does look a bit like the moon, but the moon's got probably more craters, okay? So it's got a lot in common with the moon, but there's a lot of these flat areas, which we call mare, which you have on the moon, and it's got some of these scratches as well. And it doesn't have nearly as many craters as the moon has. It could be because all the meteors are attracted to Jupiter and they never get to hit Ganymede. But there are lots of other possible reasons for that as well. Ganymede, apart from being the biggest moon in the solar system, is famous because it has a magnetic field like the Earth. The Earth has a magnetic field, and a few planets do, but it's quite rare. The good thing about a magnetic field is it protects us from the solar wind, which is very dangerous to us. And if we didn't have a magnetic field, we would probably be killed by the solar wind, by the radiation. So at least if you lived on Ganymede, you wouldn't have to worry too much about being killed by radiation. Yeah. I'm not sure it stops the asteroids. That's a good point. Might help. Yeah, that's the thing. The asteroids. Yeah. That's very true. So the good thing about dinosaurs, you all probably heard of the story about the asteroids, but these craters here are caused by meteors hitting the surface. So if there were any dinosaurs on Ganymede, they'd probably be killed now by the asteroids. Let's move on from Ganymede. So that's number 1. Now number 2, we're probably expecting to see something a little bit similar. So let's look at number 2. It's called Io. Io. Have you heard of Io? Yeah, well, have you seen Io? Let's have a look at Io. Well, you'll get a bit of a surprise if you see Io. This is Io. This is a real picture of a real moon around Jupiter. People say it looks like a pizza, but I'm not sure it's a very tasty pizza, really. You might wonder why it looks like that. If you see these things that look like mountains, they are mountains. They're volcanoes. They're the most and the biggest volcanoes that we've found in the whole of the solar system. They do have clouds as well. These are yellow clouds, okay? Remember, they're not made out of water because they wouldn't be yellow. Do you know what they're made of? Any ideas? What's yellow? Anybody who does chemistry at school, what is a yellow material? Sorry? Sulfur. And sulfur comes out of volcanoes. So sulfur coming out of volcanoes has actually turned the atmosphere yellow and the surface. Hundreds of volcanoes are erupting every day on Io. It's probably one of the most dangerous places to live, so I'm not advising you to go and visit in the near future. Let's move on because we're moving on. If they dare, yeah, I'm sure asteroids hit there. But because there are no craters, very good question. There are no craters because the volcanoes, the lava covers up the holes. So every time an asteroid hits, it gets covered up, so you can't see many craters, yeah? That's right, yeah. Jupiter's gravity is a very important thing because Jupiter's really big and it's got a lot of gravity. How many moons have we got? We've got 2 so far. Let's move on. We're moving on to one of the most famous moons where people are really, scientists are particularly interested. This is called Europa. Not Europa, but Europa. Very different moon. Totally different from Io. Totally different. Doesn't have any craters really looks like an eyeball. Some people said it looks like somebody's eyeball, but without the pupil. Okay, the little scratches look like blood veins. Little black dots. Well, that's a very good question. People are still trying to find out what these markings are. So scientists really don't know exactly. What they do know, what they have discovered, is what the white stuff is. Now, if you think of the Earth, there's white stuff on the Earth at the bottom and at the top of the Earth, the ice caps. So the white stuff is like that, it's actual ice. So in fact, the whole planet is covered with a layer of ice. So the whole planet looks like Antarctica, basically. What is ice made of? Ice is made of water. Okay? Ice is made of water, so we know there is water, a lot of water on the surface of Europa. Water is crucial for life. If we don't have water, we don't find life. This has got loads of water on the surface, but what is even more amazing, scientists have discovered, or they believe, they're not certain, they think that underneath the surface there's actual liquid water, not just a little bit of it, oceans. And some people say there are salty oceans underneath the surface of Europa. So maybe if we dug deep in there, we would actually find a whole world of life living in an ocean underneath the surface. We don't know that yet, it hasn't been proved, but that's the theory at the moment. Europa looks like a very good candidate. It also has a little bit of oxygen, but not very much in the atmosphere. Very good candidate for life. Oh, we've nearly finished now. Let's look at the last moon. Last moon is taking us home, really, because what do you think of this? So this moon is a bit like our moon. It's got loads of craters, loads. It's a bit like what is actually what we call the dark side of the moon, which I'll show you in a minute. The dark side of our moon is full of craters. Nobody knows why, but there are hundreds of craters, thousands probably, on the dark side. Callisto, this is Callisto, this has got hundreds of craters. It's one of the most cratered objects we've ever seen. Although if you look at Mercury, Mercury's got lots of craters as well, and it's a similar size. It's a bit like a sort of mini version, well not even a mini version, a version of Mercury but further away from the Sun. But we're going to finally do a U-turn right back to where we started, which is our moon. And let's have a look at our moon. Just to finish off, if I can find our moon, is not visible. Here it is. Let's have a look at the moon. One more. There it is. So you see, with this moon, our moon, it's very similar in many ways to Callisto. Fewer craters, but still quite a few. But lots of dark areas. The dark areas are called mare. That means seas. People in the past thought they were actual seas on the moon. Turns out they're just flat plains. They're not seas at all because there isn't much water on the moon. Hi. Sorry? Yeah. It's in what? Yeah. Well, in the night is we see it, but if we, I'm talking about, I'll tell you about the dark side of the moon in a minute actually, because a lot of people are confused. I haven't explained the dark side of the moon probably. Can we, before I say that, can we look at this bit here? If you're in this area, do you see all those black areas? They're the ones that are called mare. They're the ones that don't have mare, yeah. Those are the ones that don't have many craters. This is the front side of the moon. This is what you actually see when you look up in the sky. The bits we saw 2 minutes ago at the back is called the dark side of the moon. We never, ever see that. The first time anybody saw that was in 1968, when Apollo 8 went to the back of the moon. They actually saw the backside, I should call it the dark side of the moon. So we should really call it the backside of the moon. Doesn't sound very polite, so we'll call it the dark side of the moon. But this is the front side of the moon. This is the part that is always facing us, and we never see the other side. But the difference is that you get a lot of dark areas, which are mare, on the front side of the moon. On the back side, it has lots of craters. Nobody I've asked has ever explained to me fully why there are so many craters. it's, you know, what's it got, why is that coincidence? And it seems like it is a sort of coincidence. There's no particularly strong reason. Anyway, we're coming towards the end of this presentation. So, talking about going back to the moon. Will we ever go back to the moon? The last moon landing actually was in 1972. Everything was between 1969 and 1972. How many people have stood on the moon? I haven't. Have you? Nope. Does anybody know how many people have stood on the moon? It's a small number. It's only 12 people have ever stepped on the moon. That number could change in the next few years because NASA are genuinely planning to return to the moon in the next 5 years. So we are told. Okay, that is the plan. So in 5 years' time, 2024, we may well have a space station orbiting the moon. We may have astronauts in that space station and astronauts landing at different parts of the moon. As I was about to say before, is there water on the moon? There is water on the moon. There is on the pole caps, what we call the North Pole and South Pole, there are small icy caps made of water. It's ice getting melted obviously, and it's obviously there are lots of other problems with the moon. It's very cold on the moon, it's also very hot on the moon, depending upon what time of day it is. But there's a genuine plan that we will see astronauts stepping out onto the moon in the next 5 years or so. And that is my time is up. So I just wanted to hope you enjoyed the presentation, the talk, and found it interesting. And as you're in the museum as a captive audience, I should direct you to all the other interesting things in the museum. So for the rest of the day, I would like to direct you to number 1 is the lunar lander. This isn't the real lunar lander. This is a scale model of the lunar lander. The real lunar lander is on the moon, but it's a beautiful scale model of the lunar lander. But if you want the real spacecraft that's actually been to the moon, you only have to walk 50 yards down there to find Apollo 10 command module. That has been to the moon and back with 3 astronauts just in 1969. That is a fantastic thing to watch. And there's a little bit of moon rock in the cupboard over there. You might be interested in seeing what the moon's made of. We also have the Soyuz, Tim Peaks, the Soyuz spacecraft over there. I've run out of things that you can see. You can spend the rest of the day in the Science Museum if you've got the time. Anyway, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Goodbye.